Some people live to think. Some turn living itself into a form of thought. Albert Camus was one of the rare souls who did both. He learned justice while chasing a football, and solitude while sitting before a typewriter. He studied philosophy not in books, but in the dust of the streets, in the sunlight, in the sea, and in the quiet dignity of poverty. Camus was born on November 7, 1913, in Mondovi, Algeria, then under French rule. His father, Lucien, a French laborer, was killed at the Battle of the Marne during World War I. Albert was barely a year old. His mother, Catherine, was half-deaf, illiterate, and worked as a cleaning woman. Camus grew up in silence, a silence that later became the texture of his thought. In that small, poor apartment, he learned to hear life more deeply. A primary school teacher, Monsieur Germain, noticed his brilliance and changed his life. Years later, when Camus received the Nobel Prize, he would dedicate his speech to him. A teacher once showed me that the world was not meaningless. Camus studied philosophy at the University of Algiers. He planned to write his thesis on Plotinus and Christian thought, but tuberculosis stopped him. That illness taught him early how fragile the line between life and death really was. Football was his great love. He played as a goalkeeper and used to say, "Everything I know about morality and the obligations of men, I owe it to football." On the field, he learned fairness, endurance, and humility. Perhaps that's why, when he later wrote The Myth of Sisyphus, he understood that pushing the stone uphill, even knowing it would fall again, could still be an act of dignity. After leaving Algeria, Camus moved to Paris. He became a journalist, a playwright, a novelist, and gradually shaped what would become his central idea: the absurd. His first major novel, The Stranger, L'étranger, 1942, told the story of a man alienated from society. Meursault is condemned not for murder, but because he doesn't cry at his mother's funeral. Camus asked, "When is a man truly guilty, for what he does, or for not pretending what he does not feel?" That same year he published The Myth of Sisyphus, a philosophical essay confronting the question of suicide. "Knowing that life is absurd," he wrote, "is not a reason to commit suicide, but a reason to live more deeply." For Camus, man's duty was to live and push forward, even without meaning, because the struggle itself was the meaning. During World War II, Camus witnessed the Nazi occupation of France. He became one of the editors of the resistance newspaper Combat, writing essays that defended freedom and moral courage. Even in despair, he urged hope. "I know that hopelessness is the easiest and also the most sterile of attitudes." In Paris, he met Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. They shared stages, cafes, and ideas, but Camus's voice remained quieter, simpler, more human. He preferred faces over theories, and compassion over abstraction. In 1940, Camus married Francine Faure, a mathematics teacher. Together they had twin children, Catherine and Jean. Despite his restless life and inner conflicts, Camus remained deeply attached to his family. His daughter Catherine would later dedicate her life to preserving her father's literary legacy. In 1947, Camus published The Plague, La Peste, a story of an epidemic, but also an allegory of evil. Dr. Rieux, the main character, keeps fighting even when there's no God to help him. Camus showed that even in an absurd world, human beings could still choose decency. The only way to fight the plague is with honesty and compassion. The plague became the moral voice of a broken Europe. Camus was now more than a writer. He was a conscience. After the war, Camus and Sartre were close friends until politics divided them. Sartre believed in revolution and Marxism. Camus believed in the individual conscience above all ideologies. His 1951 book, The Rebel, L'Homme Révolté, became the turning point. He wrote, "I rebel, therefore I exist." But his rebellion was one of limits, a call for justice without bloodshed. Sartre attacked him in Le Temps Moderne, calling him a moralist out of touch with history. Camus didn't respond. His silence was his philosophy in action. In 1957, at the age of 44, Camus was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Not for a single book, but for his entire body of work, especially The Stranger, The Plague, and The Rebel. The Academy praised him for illuminating the problems of the human conscience in our time. In his speech, he said, "Every artist bears witness to the time in which he lives. His task is not to bow down before despair, but to oppose it." For Camus, the Nobel Prize was not a triumph, but a responsibility. He saw art as an act of honesty, not of glory. Yet even with fame, he stayed simple. He still loved the sea, football, and the silence of the early morning. On January 4th, 1960, Camus died in a car accident near Villeblevin, France. His publisher, Michel Gallimard, was driving. In his coat pocket, they found a train ticket. He had planned to travel by train, but changed his mind at the last moment. From the wreckage, a notebook was recovered. In it, a line read, "Even in the midst of death, one must love life." He was only 46. Camus never called himself an existentialist. He was the philosopher of the absurd, but also of beauty, of justice, of the sun. For him, the absence of meaning did not make life worthless. It made it precious. "Everything begins," he said, "with the simple act of not understanding." Like Sisyphus, Camus accepted the endless climb, because, in that very effort, he found dignity. After his death, Sartre wrote, "The conscience of our generation has died." Yet Camus' voice never faded. The Stranger, The Plague, The Fall, The First Man, and the Myth of Sisyphus still ask the same eternal question. How can one live when life itself has no meaning? Camus's answer never changed. By living. For Albert Camus, life was not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be embraced. He was a thinker who felt, and a man who thought, a philosopher as human as his words. "I loved the sun," he once wrote, "for it taught me that my shadow was mine to carry." Perhaps that is the essence of his wisdom, to love the light without denying the shadow.